It would freak me out if I even thought this place was haunted. Because if you think it's haunted, it is. It's like, because it's just the way it works. It's like, do you believe in ghosts? Well, if you even have the conversation, clearly you do. Because it's like, it's and even if you don't, and you're going to freak yourself out,
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to All Beer Inside. This morning we are in Hinesburg, Vermont, and joining me is Garin of Frost Beer Works. Thank you very much for hosting us today. Really appreciate anybody who's willing to take time out of their obviously very busy schedule, even when you walked in to speak with us about your brewery and your delicious product here and everything else.
Thanks for coming in.
So what's the beer story? What led to the creation of Frost Beer Works?
I was a home brewer for a number of years and kind of focusing on German style beers. I was a big fan of like alt beers, and I think I had some pretty successful batches of alt beer, and then I started to get interested in the hoppier style beers, New England style IPAs, and I had a really nice home brew setup and decided that I wanted to take it to the next step. So we built this very small scale brewery just in this little 1,000 square foot space. And the idea was just going to do maybe a batch a month or something like that. And quickly we jumped into doing, multiple batches a week. And we started a little mini production brewery. And ever since then, we've basically grown into the full space of the facility. And now we're, 6,000 barrel a year brewery at maxed out, 100% at capacity. And it's been a fun ride.
It's been a busy ride too, I'm assuming. You brought me out some delicious looking beers here to try. What am I starting with here?
So you've got Star Child on the left here, which is that's all New Zealand hops. And then the next one is going to be Plush.
Okay.
We named it Plush, a tribute to Scott Weiland. And then Lush is kind of our flagship double IPA. And then Heavy Imperial Stout is the final beer there.
So tell me a bit about this. It's New Zealand. What's the alcohol percentage on this?
I believe it's a 6%.
Okay.
Could be 5.5 or 6. Yeah. It's 6.
Amazing. Toast.
Cheers. Yeah, it's tasty. This batch is really good.
Wow,
really
that
good.
Is incredibly clean.
Yeah, super tasty.
Yeah. It's dangerously crushable.
That's really good. I had a few of those last night. Quite nice.
Yeah, yeah. I could see this being a problem, just having a few of these on the beach and being like, I need a designated driver now.
Yeah, it's really good.
So for those who don't know, your last name is Frost. Frost Beer Works. Correct. What made you decide Frost Beer Works, not Hinesburg Brewing or like the town or this lot you're in? Like,
it was always, the name Frost was always intended to be part of the name of the brewery, just because it seems to make sense. Good name for a brewery, I guess. But we did look at some other options, not just Frost Beer Works. It's been a long time, so I don't even recall all the other options we had. But all of them did include Frost.
Okay.
Frost Brewing was one of them, and some people still mistakenly call us Frost Brewing. We have a number of different vendors that have us listed as Frost Brewing, which is kind of humorous, and we have to constantly correct them. We're like, no, it's Frost Beer Works. Yeah. But anyway, yeah, it's I think a pretty good last name to be a brewery owner.
I mean, America's at like 6,000 microbreweries right now. For sure, I'm sure there's Frost Brewing for all in like California or Denver or something.
I don't know. I don't think so. Actually, we did. The name Frost is used in a couple of different applications, but I don't think there's another Frost Brewing company. Fortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm sure you don't want to send out that cease and desist or get a cease and desist one day.
No, and it's a little bit dicey because we've gone through some. Going through the process of trademarking certain things, and it's really it's complex, especially when you deal with really generic names, like the name Lush, for example. We came out with this beer in 2015, prior to another brewery that actually uses the name Lush on one of their beers. And we're in different areas of the country, and we both have been, separately using the name Lush for a similar amount of time. Yeah. But it's not a trademarkable name, unfortunately, so either of us wouldn't have any luck, so we just have to stick with our own areas, basically. It's kind of interesting.
Because I know there's a makeup company called Lush, but they can't come after you for naming your beer Lush. It's, I guess,
correct.
The trademark stuff.
Correct. Yeah, and the trademark stuff is difficult. There's it's not even easy to trademark. We did some research, and we were going to try to trademark Lush Double IPA, and it wouldn't have been an easy one. It probably could be done, but it would just probably cost a lot of money. Yeah. And not even certain that it would actually happen. So
I mean, it's not that different. I'm up from Montreal drinking your Lush. If there's a brewery in Montreal that also had a Lush, it'd be like, okay, well, it's two different beers. There's no question about it. And they might even just have a completely thing. They might call it Lush, but it might be a Kolsch.
Right,
right.
Kolsch style.
Yeah, I've seen a dozen breweries using like cryptids and stuff. It's like, I've seen, I think, 15 breweries that have a Sasquatch of some sort.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be a problem naming the beers. To me, yes, maybe same brewery name, that's a little questionable, but the beer names, just let them go.
Yeah, I've seen the term frost used in a number of different references in the brewing industry, but none of them really overlap anything that we're doing, and we're so small, and nothing's really going to necessarily impact the position that we have in the market. It's pretty funny.
Anybody ever ask you if you named it after the bad guy in the first Blade movie?
No, nobody's ever asked me that. They do ask me frequently, though, if I'm related to the other Frosts in town, because there's a number of Frosts in Hinesburg, and I'm not related to any of them, which is really kind of interesting. But yeah, and there's a Frost that lives right up the street that has a big sign out in front of his house, so people will come in and be like, "Oh, we went by your house," and I'm like, "No, you didn't."
That's fantastic.
It's really funny.
Okay. So 2015, we'll get into the pandemic stuff after, but just starting in 2015, what were kind of like some roadblocks and difficulties? Was the town of Hinesburg very welcoming? City councilors like,
the town,
finding a location?
It was super, everything was really easy because we were starting at such a small scale, really easy. We worked with the folks at the state to kind of talk through what the wastewater situation would look like. And because we were at such a small volume, we weren't going to be overwhelming the facilities here in Hinesburg. So it was really very straightforward, really easy, and the whole town was super welcoming. All of the businesses, local businesses, the police department, everybody, great folks to work with. The challenges, I think anybody who would open a brewery would probably agree there are a lot of challenges brewing beer. It's like, it's amazing how easy it can be when things go right, but there's just so much opportunity for things to go wrong. And I would say the biggest challenge that we had and continue to have on occasion is it's yeast. It's the reality. Brewing beer is all about yeast, and it is definitely the most challenging component of the entire business. There's so many little things that are challenging, but the number one most important, I think, constant challenge is yeast and yeast health, and just kind of managing it.
Plus that water balance too.
Absolutely. It's hugely important. We early on took the approach with water that we, it's funny, Hinesburg I have a little plaque, has the best tasting water in Vermont, but we actually do reverse osmosis on all of our water. So all the water comes in, goes through an RO process and is basically, the equivalent of distilled water, and then we mineralize. So we have our own water profile and we've done that from the very beginning. In fact, I did that when I was homebrewing, just so that when and if I ever opened a brewery or wanted to produce this beer at a different location, I would be able to do the exact same thing. I would just start with the equivalent of distilled water, and then mineralize to my particular profile. So we've always done that. So water has not, other than the fact that we have to use 1.4 times the volume to get the same amount of water, because we're getting about 60% efficiency on our reverse osmosis. But so the water is a hugely important component for sure, but much easier to manage than yeast.
Yeah. What were those first few homebrew days like that? Were you ever like, screw this, I'm done, or this is great, I got to make this professionally?
I always really enjoyed it. When I had homebrewed on little smaller setups, and then when I built my own little mini brewery at my house in the basement of my house, I built it really pretty substantially, I'll say. I kind of treated it like a little mini brewery. It had everything. It was everything like a big brewery, only small. I had glycol chilled fermenters and heat exchangers, everything that you'd have in a larger scale brewery, but it's just small. It didn't speed up, of course, the brew day, because it was still a little mini 2-vessel system. But there were obviously a lot of challenges. The biggest challenge that I had homebrewing was just timing, because I would much like I think a lot of homebrewers do. I would put things off until for example, I would wait sometimes I would wait to clean the fermenter until the day that I'm actually brewing, because I'd have another beer I'm transferring out. So I'd be like, oh, it's going to be fine because I have plenty of time. I'll mash in, and I've got I've got an hour to waste, and of course, the time just gets squeezed up, and inevitably you find yourself, chasing your tail around, trying to get everything prepared. And you're like, oh my gosh, it's time to knock out. I got this and that. And I still got to do this, and I got, it's timing is key. Of course, here it's much more streamlined than what I was doing at home. It's like sort of practicing what I preach, and here we actually practice what I preach. At home, I don't think I did as good of a job with it. So, kind of humorous.
So beer number 2, you said is Plush.
Plush,
okay.
Which is kind of similar to Lush in some respects. A little bit different grain bill, and I'd say it's a little more of an earthy character versus a little bit more of a fruity character in Lush. Mm-hmm. Primarily just based on the hops, hop choices.
Fantastic. Toast.
Cheers. It's pretty tasty.
What's the alcohol percentage?
That's 8.
Yeah. See, this is what I love about these beers is you don't get that, like you don't taste an 8% beer.
Right.
And that's the dangerous part of like when I first started my craft beer journey. I was brainwashed by the masses to think like high alcohol is you're gonna taste ethanol and it's gonna taste terrible, and then
which can happen. That can certainly happen. Based on the fermentation, and certainly if it's fermented properly, then you shouldn't be getting those higher alcohols, but it can happen.
My craft beer journey, I can't even remember when it started, honestly. It started because of the World Beer Festival in Montreal, and it's like, whoa, beer can have flavor. And then his friends are like, no, the Budweiser tent is selling it for $1. I'm like, no, Budweiser, a multi-million-dollar company. They don't need my money.
Exactly. They do make good beer, though.
Yeah.
Definitely good beer.
Yeah. Speaking of those those macro drinkers, you get a hardcore macro person in here.
Right.
What's that gateway beer here?
I would say almost all of our single IPAs are pretty manageable, and they're really approachable. Like that Star Child, for example. I mean, there are a lot of folks that don't even really think that they like hoppy beers, and they'll drink a beer like this, and they actually will like it. And I think part of that is because they're hoppy, but they're not necessarily that bitter. We don't really have any bittering additions, although we are getting some bitterness through the hops. Through our Whirlpool editions, but we don't target, bittering additions. So it's not a bitter beer. So it's, historically, back in the old days, I say old days, like 10 years ago, when people thought about hoppy beers, they thought about bitter beers. And it's still a little bit like that, obviously, like West Coast style ales and IPAs, but with typical, I'll say, East Coast style hazy IPAs, they're not that bitter, really. The hop additions are really just more for aroma and flavor characteristics. So the lighter, cleanly fermented beers, cleanly fermented IPAs that we have, a lot of people could jump over to one of those beers from any of their favorite yellow beers and be pretty satisfied with it. Although they're still going to want to go back and drink their yellow beers. It's fantastic. I wouldn't tell somebody who's drinking Coors Light or Bud that they ought to have a Star Child. I mean, they could have one Star Child for sure, but then just go back to Old Faithful because they work well.
So what I always ask too now is because 2 years kind of lockdown pandemic, how much did the local step up and really support Frost?
We have a really a strong local following. I say local, I mean obviously Hinesburg is a small place, but there's a good community in Hinesburg, and Charlotte, Shelburne, Burlington, South Burlington, Williston. I mean, all around, Huntington, all the south, this whole corridor. But it's really all of Vermont. I mean, I think that Vermonters really they like to support local, and the volumes of beer that we sell into the state, that I think gets consumed in the state, would support that theory that it's a very local centric place, and it's super cool. I think almost all other states are doing the same thing. In fact, what'll happen is I think we'll start to see some decline in sales in other states because the same thing's happening across multiple states. People they want to buy local, they want to support their local economy.
That's one thing I love about the U.S. versus where I live in Canada is you guys can send your beers to another state. Sorry, right. I went pure Canadian there. Whereas, unfortunately, I live in the province of Quebec. I can't get beer from Ontario unless there's all these wacky rules. And that's one thing where I get very jealous is I can go to the Winooski Beverage Center. I could buy 24 Vermont beers and then crazy. 24 beers from all over the U.S. And that's That's something I'm a huge proponent of, is because, it might not be your state, but you're still supporting a local business in the end.
Yep.
So.
Which is really, really, really cool. I mean, it's, we don't think, because we do send about 40% of our beer does go out of state. We fully expect those out of state customers to support their local, their local breweries. So we just want to be in the rotation, just one of those numbers in the rotation. Maybe every 50th time they go into the store, they'll grab a 4-pack of Frost and they'll be psyched. But our hope is that at least 50% of the time they're buying their local beer. And likewise in our state, we like to support local.
Yeah, that's the most important part. Is as long as you're supporting, the way I know it's a negative. Some people it's a negative connotation, but a mom and pop business, to me, it's you and your wife who literally own the business.
It's amazing, yeah. I mean, and it's we have incredible employees, and it's a great way to have a super chill place to work. Now I say chill meaning it's very manageable, but these guys are I've got really, really good people, and they have a lot of responsibility.
Yeah.
But it's a great job. There's nobody breathing down their throat. They do have to, of course, deliver. They have to be really good at what they do, but the fact that we have the support that we have, it provides us the opportunity to give 5 people plus all of our vendors all these opportunities to have a good time while making a living.
Yeah, it's been repeated time and time again, but if you love what you do, you're not really working a day in your life.
Right,
so.
Right, exactly.
Speaking of that, let's say you do have 2 weeks your team's ready to take over for 2 weeks. You could just step away for 2 weeks and go on that beercation you've never taken. Where are you going?
So the one that I've never, pretty much my entire life is kind of like a beercation in some ways, but there's a lot of areas I think that I would like to go to enjoy the beer, but in truth, I really am a huge supporter of West Coast style beers. We do some West Coast styles here. They're really not our specialty. So I love California. So I'd just say it's California. I mean, we have gone to Germany, Austria, Germany, specifically around beer and like a beercation. But I think California, if I had to say 2 weeks of just enjoying the beers in the location, I'd say I do 2 weeks in California, which is a pretty easy one. It's manageable. So
yeah, it's one of the bigger states from what I remember too. I think it's like Texas, California, or up there is like the bigger
there's
states.
Pretty much there are a lot of great breweries in California, and it's a fun place. Obviously, beer's good, weather's good.
We've spoken with an influencer, and he was saying Nevada's beer scene is really starting to step up too.
Colorado's is crazy as well. Yeah. Colorado's insane. It's pretty amazing.
I mean, Great American Beer Festival in Denver every year. It's the big one. So.
It's Colorado is crazy, really fun. I love that place.
Yeah, I know we were talking about it because this show started as just a podcast. Now it's both a YouTube and a podcast, but. We were talking about haunted breweries, and there's apparently 2 in Colorado, and we're like, well, we have to go at some point because every podcast is about hauntings or murders, and we don't want to be involved in murders.
Right.
So let's go to a haunted brewery, see if anything happens. Valcor in Plattsburgh, they're in an old military barracks, and there's rumors it's haunted. I'm like, oh, if we could just get that footage.
Gosh, that seems eerie. I mean, I've spent so many, especially in the early years, I spent so many nights here alone. It would freak me out if I even thought this place was haunted. Because if you think it's haunted, it is. It's because it's just the way it works. It's like, do you believe in ghosts? Well, if you even have the conversation, clearly you do. Because it's it's and even if you don't, and you're going to freak yourself out,
Yeah. That's anytime I'm at a random inn or whatever for the show, we spend a weekend somewhere, I'm just like, God, I hope it's not haunted.
Right. Yeah. Although I've always really wanted to spend the night in some haunted castle. There are some really amazing castles in Germany, obviously, and or all over Europe, clearly. But I think it'd be awesome to spend a night in a haunted castle. I mean, I'm not saying I wouldn't be freaked out. I probably wouldn't sleep a wink, but it'd be exciting.
Yeah. This is Lush, you said?
That is Lush, and that's kind of, I'd say, our flagship beer. It's sort of, I'll say, our baby. I mean, it's what we produce the most of. It's what we sell the most of. It's kind of it was really the first beer in this style that we were like, yeah, this is really good. I mean, of course, it's it's changed a bit since 2015, but it's evolved. I'll say that. It's a really great beer. Super clean, super manageable. It's my personal favorite.
Fantastic. Toast.
Cheers. Yeah, super tasty. It's like
another 8%.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
And it's the thing about Lush is it's not like you can line it up with a whole bunch of different double IPAs, and some are going to be like they're going to knock your socks off. This isn't a beer that is going to knock your socks off, but it is super consistent, super tasty, super approachable, drinkable. It's an awesome beer. It's like I said, we started brewing it in 2015, and it's evolved slightly, but it's pretty much the same beer.
Yeah, that's all your beers super deceivingly super crushable, which is very dangerous. Yeah. You have some pretty unique names: Lush, Plush, Starchild, Kakamora. Where does the naming convention come from?
So the names, I mean, there's obviously there's a long backstory to most of the names, but we typically wouldn't even have a name for a beer until the night before we packaged the beer. When it was just me and another guy, it would be like late at night. I'm trying to figure out a name for the particular beer that we're going to package, and it would be in the final hour. I'd come up with a name, and then I'd actually have to put the name and compose the label, and then I would print the label the night before we would bottle. This is back when we were bottling, and so often I would not even have the name of the beer until late evening. I'd get the label finished. I'd print the labels basically through the night. It would take me like 2 or 3 hours to print the labels. I'd bring the labels in the morning, and then we would bottle the beer. So it was a much more haphazard naming process than what we currently have. Now it's most of the names the brands that we have are pretty stable, and those names have been around. But we do play around with names, and they're mostly like for research series. Like these are just research series names.
Okay.
These guys are, and those names. If it's a beer that we brew a lot, that research series, then we might turn that research series into an actual brand. That's like Starchild used to be a research series, and it became a brand, Starchild. But
so your labels, you stuck with white with the names. Some people just go wild with like animation characters. Why that, and why not go crazy like a lot of people do?
Yeah, it wasn't. We really just want to have a super clean design that's really recognizable, and our intention was never to do it on purpose, like from a marketing standpoint. Mm-hmm. It's just sort of our nature. My wife and I are both, we really appreciate really simplistic design, really clean, simplistic design. And so, for that reason, it ended up being that they're white. Now, the other component is that for years, we pre-printed we did all the printing ourselves. And so we didn't go into it with the idea that we wanted less coverage on the label so that it was cheaper in terms of the cost of ink. But as it turns out, of course, it was cheaper. And so there were benefits to having the clean, white design. And we don't really have any interest in bringing a lot of excitement to our labels, even though we've had a number of people that have given us feedback that we ought to. I think we've had more feedback that people appreciate the label. So it's one of those things. We are all about consistency, and that label has looked essentially the same since we started. And other than some small changes that we're kind of considering, our hope is that the label's always going to look like that, and people are going to be able to recognize and associate that kind of that color and that mock-up with the brand Frost.
And speaking of the Frost logo, the Frost, but the O is a hop. Beerworks. And it almost looks like the Heinz symbol. What made you pick that as a logo?
Well, my wife is a graphic designer, and
okay.
and I came from a printing background, so I've had a lot of exposure and experience with graphic design and graphics in general. And we absolutely labored over this logo. I mean, we had so many different iterations, and frankly, we were never satisfied. We were not even satisfied with our current logo. But at one point, we're finally just like, we got to settle on something because we're never going to be satisfied.
We're opening tomorrow. We need to.
Seriously, it was probably like an 8-month process of just like noodling it, and we finally were just like, we got to settle on something. Let's just go with what we think is the best, and so we just kept narrowing it down, and then we were just like, okay, there it is. Let's just go with it. And so we've leveraged it. We've come to accept it. We're not 100% stoked on it, but there again, it's when you build a brand and people kind of associate your beer with that brand, we don't have any interest in going back and changing it now. Because first of all, we don't even know what we would do because we weren't, like I said, we tried everything in our power to satisfy ourselves, and we were unable to do that. So.
You've been around since 2015. I'm guessing you've done a couple of collabs. What are some of those collabs you've done?
Yeah,
Whether it be from like working with a local restaurant to make a beer specifically for them, to a coffee maker
We've done a few collabs. We do our coffee Imperial Stout. We use Paradiso Farms beans with a particular roast that Steve and I came up with. Steve from Paradiso, and he makes great coffee. But I like to roast it a little bit past the first crack, and so it's a little more than he typically roasts. So he does a special roast for us. In fact, we just ordered a 10 pounds for our next batch of I think it's coffee porter this time. Yeah, or it might be Imperial Stout with coffee. I can't remember which of the two we do. And the other collab, which we're going to do again, which is a fantastic collab, is we do a collab with Hermit Thrush. We call it Hermit Lush. So it's a double sour IPA, and it's absolutely fantastic. My contributions to that, it's basically our grain bill. It's Lush, okay? It's our grain bill. I provide all the fresh hops. They'll source all the grains because they're using similar grains to ours, and then I bring down all the fresh hops because, as you probably know, Hermit Thrush is not necessarily a kind of a fresh hop type of facility. So I provide all the hops, and we dry hop it just like we would a conventional. Double IPA, but they do all their souring. We kettle sour, and then we further sour it during fermentation, and it's absolutely fantastic. And we're going to do that again. It's unbelievably tasty. It's one of our favorites, and we'll have that on draft hopefully within by 2 or 3 months from now. So
I unfortunately haven't had your collab with them, but Hermit Thrush, they literally say yes, they're all sour.
Yeah,
so.
All sour. Yeah.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
If you could collab with anybody else, any dream collabs, like what are 1 or 2 collabs that you'd love to do?
That is a tough one. The reason I would want to do a collab with a really, I'll say upscale brewery would be primarily because I want to use their equipment. So it's an interesting one. But so a lot of these guys that are really big and really awesome are not typically going to be the guys that are going to want to do a collab with Little Frost Beer Works.
So
and they're certainly not going to let me
Brewdog or any of those guys type of thing.
Yeah, I wanted to. I've wanted to do collabs with some of the big guys who do have just ridiculous Hoopman or Steinecker systems, and I'm just jealous of the equipment they get to use all the time, and so I want to do a collab because they make great beer, and it's like I'd like to see what our beer would be like if we were. It's kind of like I'm driving around in a little souped up Honda Civic, and I'd love to drive the twin turbo Porsche once. So.
Could you see, because Jack from Weird Window came out of here, would you do a collab with Jack at some point if the opportunity arose?
Potentially, but then it'd be both of us driving, the souped up Honda Civics. So.
Fantastic.
But we're all for collabs with local guys because everybody's got a lot to bring to the table. And, and it's super fun. We have. I'm trying to think who else. We've done some collabs with some other folks, and it's been super fun. We did one with Propeg. I did a couple of them with Propeg back in the day, and that was super fun. But yeah, I'm open to do collabs with anybody really. As long as we could
see, what I do like about Vermont is like everybody's kind of 2 hours away from each other when you really think about it. So it's it's a tiny state but big beer, as they say. So
yeah, exactly.
It's, for sure. Speaking of that souped up, this is the souped up beer here, the Imperial.
That's the heavy Imperial Stout. Yep. That's it's a fantastic beer. It's just it's just a straight Imperial Stout. There's no adjuncts or flavoring or anything like that. It's exactly the way I like it. Honestly, that beer's been around for a long time as well. We've been brewing that since we opened in 2015 as well.
The nose is beautiful.
It's really we do a barrel aged version of that as well, which is fantastic.
Awesome. Toast.
Cheers.
10%.
I believe it's 9.
9. Okay. Yeah. Still, it's the same thing. It's all your beers like it masks the alcohol like that. There's really, no question about it.
Really, really tasty.
Wow. That
is I love that beer.
All your beers, honestly, very dangerous. Like, buy some cans and go home after. But for somebody who comes here, like myself, try a few beers, buy some cans to bring back across the border after 48 hours. friends in the area that you suggest I check out, from restaurants to coffee shops to other breweries? Like, who should I visit while I'm here in Hinesburg, or within, like, let's say, an hour drive?
Well, an hour, of course, you have pretty much all of Burlington,
which
is kind of crazy. But in Hinesburg, for sure, I mean, we have the Public House right here, which is great. They always have our beer on draft there. I say always. I'm not in there all of the time, so I don't really know. But they have really good food over there and nice folks. There's a fantastic sandwich shop, Paisley Hippo, right in the corner here. And so we often suggest to people to get a sandwich at Paisley and then sit in our in our tasting room, not in this room, but in the other room. Because we don't really have any prepared food, so that's Paisley makes fantastic sandwiches. But as far as Hinesburg is concerned, really there's not a lot of options here. And I think once you go 30 minutes or 20 minutes up to Burlington, I mean, the sky's the limit. There's so many great breweries and restaurants. It's fantastic.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Love it. What's next for Frost Beer Works as a brand?
Frost Beer Works is currently just kind of staying the course, I'll say. Trying to become as efficient as we possibly can at the size that we are, which is hugely important because we're maxed out in terms of our space. The hope is that 3, 4, 5 years from now, if there's enough demand for our beer that we may go through some sort of a process of building out a new facility. But at this point, we're producing 6,000 barrels out of our facility, and we're really happy that that's all we can produce, because it seems to be kind of a sweet spot. We don't have to fight too much to keep our beer on the shelves and keep it fresh. So we'd like to be bigger, but we're really quite happy to be at the size we are, as long as people are drinking and enjoying the beer.
Yeah. I see you're an Untappd verified venue. Do you find that helps at all? You drags in the beer Pokemon players, as I call them. So
I don't know about that. I mean, we really appreciate people reviewing our beers. Whether they're good or bad. Of course, we prefer them to be good reviews, obviously. But Untappd seems to be probably the most popular method of beer reviews. And I think we really like it and we support it. I mean, I'm fully in support of any of these sort of unified systems, and we use Untappd for our menus and everything because we're putting the beers in there anyway, so that people can post the reviews against them. So it's pretty slick. Of course, integration between Untappd and our own homegrown database, in-house database would be awesome, as well as maybe integration with our point of sale. And the more things you can integrate, I think the better experience it is for employees and for customers.
Awesome. Garin, thank you very, very much for speaking with us today. For those who are looking for Frost Beer Works, let them know where they could find you.
Frostbeerworks.com is our website. You can find us on Instagram. It's pretty easy. Just search for Frost, but it's frost.beer.works. And on our website, there's a beer finder. You can find all the different retailers that are carrying our beer. For sure, if you're in a on-premise and you got it on draft, definitely grab one of the draft beers, because it always tastes fantastic on draft.
And where can people physically find you for those who are looking for you?
We are in Hinesburg. We're on Commerce Street in Hinesburg. And just search it up, Frost Beer Works. I think we're the only Frost Beer Works, so it's pretty easy.
We're going to add all that in the show notes, along with the address of those who are looking for you. As for us, allbeerinside.com is the website, at allbeerinside on all social media, and this is the end of all episodes. Drink craft, not crap.